Hey, welcome back to wheatbeat.com. My name is Mike, and if you've been following my series, you know I am building a commercial style bakery right inside my home, and it's been a very long process. And you can click the link up above if you want to get caught up on the whole series, or if you're too lazy for that, you can just click this link and find out about the very latest that we did, which was installing this convection oven and hooking it up to the electrical. That was kind of a weird. We had a lot of little hiccups and problems, and you're welcome to see that video and see how all that happened, especially with the electrical. But today I'm actually going to do what I set out to do. Oh gosh, it's probably been about a year now to get to the point where I could actually bake a loaf of bread, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. So join me. Okay, and we're back. So today we're going to make some challah, an enriched bread, and I'm not really going to go through the formulation. I'm not going to go through the recipe. That's not really the point of this video at all. I will do a separate video if anybody's interested on making challah, go through the formulation in much more detail. Today I'm just going to roughly show you what I'm doing, but the main point of today is to look at that brand new oven and see how it performs. We're going to try out the proofer, and we're going to try the different settings. We're going to get that oven fired up and baking something in it. So today is really just looking at equipment more than the actual bread itself. But what we have here today is challah. So we have the brand new flour that we got. We're mixing it with lots of eggs and honey and sugar and oil and then salt and everything else. So the first thing we're going to do actually is make a sponge. It's basically a low hydration dough that we mix a lot of the yeast and a little bit of water with the flour, and we let that sit for about a half an hour. It's not a long-term type of fermentation, but it's really to make sure that all that yeast is fully dissolved and activated before we mix it into our regular dough. So let's get started with all that. All right, so first we're going to put in our water here, and then we got our flour and yeast. And this is going to be for the sponge. So we're going to put this in the spiral mixer and let it mix. Now we are putting it in our smaller fromage mixer here. This, as you may or may not know from past videos, and you can watch that video, there's a huge brand new spiral mixer right next to me. But we're going to use a little one because we're making a small batch of challah. We're not really doing a full production scale here. This is just to test out the new oven. So I'm only going to make like 6 loaves or something like that. So let's go ahead and start that mixing on low and get this sponge mixed up, and then we'll let it ferment right in here for about a half an hour. Okay, and that looks about done. We have a nice stiff sponge there, and then we're going to cover this with saran wrap and leave it here for about a half an hour and come back. Okay, now that the sponge is ready, we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. Here I've pre-measured the flour and the salt, so just the rest of the dry ingredients. And then over here we have all our wet ingredients, which is basically eggs, egg yolks, honey, oil, and then we're going to add all of these to the sponge. Over here I have the sugar, and I'm going to add this in stages after the gluten starts to develop. In a later video we'll talk about why we never add this much sugar right at the beginning of your mix, because you can break your dough that way, meaning it's going to become just a mush, because this is hygroscopic and it absorbs a lot of the water and takes it away from the gluten and the yeast. So we add this after the gluten's been developed, and we'll talk about sort of the science behind adding sugar later in a future video. So let's go ahead and add all this now. All right, so we have this wrapped up while it was fermenting in the bowl, and it's probably expanded a little bit, which is good. And now we're going to add the liquid, and now the dry ingredients. Minus the sugar. And then we'll start this on low speed. So we're going to give this 5 minutes for the dry ingredients to mix with the wet, for the gluten to be fully hydrated, and then we'll go to a high speed to fully develop the gluten. Okay, we're just about at 5 minutes now on slow speed, and if you look down in there, it probably looks pretty dry and crumbly for what you would expect for a bread dough, but this is actually normal for challah, because it's a very low hydration dough, meaning there's not a lot of moisture in this dough, so it looks crumbly. After we fully develop this dough, it's going to be a lot more smooth and look a lot more like a cohesive mass, which is what we're expecting. But at these initial stages, this crumbly dry look is normal. And this is one of the advantages with a spiral mixer. So if you look, we have this breaker bar, this bar going down the middle here, which is going to help incorporate all the ingredients together and mix them a lot more thoroughly. And we will spend other future videos talking about the advantages of a spiral mixer over your KitchenAid when it comes to making dough, especially low hydration dough like this, which can be pretty demanding of your mixer and the motor. So let's go ahead and turn this up now to higher speed and really start to develop this gluten more thoroughly, and then we'll add the sugar in stages. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this up now to the faster speed. And we're going to let this go for 12 minutes, long time. And then we're going to add the sugar after about 4 minutes of this mixing and for the gluten to have a chance to develop more. So we'll come back in about 4 minutes. Okay, it's been about 4 minutes and I'm going to add 1 of 3 increments of sugar now. And we're going to let that thoroughly mix in before I add the next 2 increments. I won't show you all that because today we're not focusing on this formulation. We're just making some challah. So as soon as I'm done with this, we'll roll out, or actually weigh out, little balls of dough, and we're going to make strands from them and then braid them and then put it in the proofer. So I'm going to sort of cut to that portion now. Okay, now we've weighed out the dough and we're going to braid all this into challahs and then we're going to proof it. Okay, everything's braided and I've done 1 egg wash. This happens to be a 3 braided challah, and this is the rest are 4 strand braids, and in the future episode, if there's any interest, we'll do 6 braid and talk about how to do all that. But now we're going to put this in the proofer, so let's go over there. Okay, we're finally at the oven, and this is the oven up top. Down here below is the proofer. So let's turn this on to proof, and then we're going to set the temperature to right around 80, which I've preset here. And then over here is the humidity level. Down here is the actual temperature. So right now, it's sort of hard to read, but I think it's around 70, 65, 70 degrees. So we're going to turn it up to 80 degrees, and then we're going to just add a touch of humidity just to see how it works. And then inside here, let's open it up and see. So in here, if I lift out this tray, in here you can see this is the water container, and inside is an element that's going to heat up the water. And then there's like a little flapper over here, just like in your home toilet, that when the water level goes down, it fills it up with more water from this spigot over here. So it's a little bit loud in there, so let me back up. I'm going to put the tray back on, and then we're going to get our challah in there, and we're going to let it proof for a couple of hours. And I'm going to use this little measuring device and see how it's performing, if it's going according to the temperature that I set and the humidity that I set. So we'll see. Let's put them in. Okay, trays are inside. I have my little measuring tool there just to see where things are at. Close this up, and I'm going to let it go for a little bit, and we're going to see what temperature it ultimately gets to and what humidity it ultimately gets into. Right now it's 32% humidity, already going up, and 64.6 degrees inside according to that little tool. Okay, I'm back. It's been about half an hour, and it's sort of settled in. It's hard to see in the video. It's settled in at 79% humidity and a little over 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going actually pretty well. My target is 80% humidity and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And unfortunately, this dial here is extremely hard to read. You sort of need a magnifying glass to figure it out. But it pretty much corroborates what I see inside in terms of temperature. So I'm going to make a very, very minor adjustment, but my humidity is actually at the lowest setting. It's at 1 right now. And this is pretty well sealed door. So I think that if you add any humidity, it's just going to saturate. It's going to become like an Amazon jungle in there. It's just going to be 100% humidity, and it's going to stay that way. So I'm not sure what all these other increments are going to be useful for. So I'm going to leave it on 1. I may turn up the temperature ever so slightly, and then we're just going to continue on with our proof. So far it's going well. Okay, it's been 2 hours now, and we're at 82% humidity and 81.3 degrees Fahrenheit. So right on track. Everything's going well. I'm going to give it probably another half an hour or so, maybe even an hour for a long final proof, and then we'll start up the oven. Okay, we're at the 5-hour mark now. Pretty long proof. We're at 84% humidity, 81 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's been staying very, very consistent with the settings at just on 1 for humidity and just about 80 degrees here on the temperature. So I'm going to do another egg wash on these, and then I'm going to bake these 1 tray at a time so we can try different temperatures and times and see how that is going to work. So I'm going to start by preheating the oven. So now we get to go back to the oven and turn it on. And then I'm going to start at a low temperature. So I'm going to start at 300 degrees. And right now it's starting there, and then we'll come back when that's ready. This preheats very, very quickly, and then we'll start our bake. Now here we can hear and see the fan is running inside there. Every 2 minutes it stops and reverses directions, so that way the air inside is a lot more random. The convection is a lot more random. So now you're going to hear it stop, and then it's going to reverse directions. So now it's stopped, and now you're going to hear it reactivate, and it's going to go in the other direction, the fan inside here. See, now it's going in the other direction. So now the air movement inside is a lot more random. Okay, we are 7 minutes into it, and it's already getting quite a lot of color, which is more than I think I would want. So we may turn down the temperature. We'll kind of see how this one turns out before deciding what to do for the next batch. Okay, we are down to the last 5 minutes. We're 15 minutes into it, and we got quite a bit of color. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and now push the vent button to release the steam that we incorporated at the earlier stage. So we'll push the vent button and see what happens there. All right, looks like we're just about done here, 10 seconds to go. And I actually ended up at a very low temperature, 290. So, and I still got quite a bit of color. So I'm going to look at it now coming out of the oven. Let's take it out and check. Oh, there's still quite a lot of steam coming out of there, so I don't know how well that vented. All right, this is round 1. We'll talk about it in a second. And now round 2, I'm going to actually lower the temperature a little bit and see how it goes. By the way, this is salt here on the top. Okay, second round now. We're at 5 minutes. I'm going to try the vent. Maybe it will do something different right now. I don't know. Will it do anything different? I don't know. No, not really. So it is looking a little less color than the last batch. I have turned the temperature down to 275, which is pretty darn low for baking bread. Normally for challah like this, I would have done around 375 or 350 at the lowest. So I'm really surprised to get this much color from that temperature. I have one of those infrared thermometers, so as soon as I open this, I'm going to see what the inside temperature is, and compare, it's possible that this number is just not accurate. The thermometer is not accurate. So I'm creating a list of questions I'll have for Moffett, the company that makes this oven, to see what they think about that. Also, the fact that I push vent and I would have expected a plume of steam to come out the top, and nothing like that happened. And yet when I opened the door, all that steam suddenly came out. So it's almost as if the vent isn't working. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I have to press and hold it. So anyhow, in 3 minutes, this will be done, and then we'll take it out and compare to the first batch, which I actually did at 300 degrees, 25 degrees higher. Okay, I've taken the last tray out. It's set at 275. It says it's at 289, even though it's set for 275, because I guess it just heats up incrementally. But I'm gonna, I have this infrared thermometer. I'm just gonna open the door real quick and see what the temperature reading is. So right now it says it's at 295-ish, and it thinks it's at 275. So it's basically close enough that I would say that the temperature here is accurate. But why is it browning so much? It could be because the fan is quite powerful. The fan does have a low speed and a high speed. It was on low. If I turn it to, if I just turned off the hood fan, so it's a lot less noisy. But if I push this button, it will go to a high speed fan, and you'll hear the difference. So I'm not doing that. And interestingly enough, this vent button seems to do more when I have it on high. But I have a list of questions I'm going to ask Moffett, and then we'll see. I'll also look through the instruction book again and see if I can answer some of these questions. But my best guess here, unless someone wants to make a comment down below why they think such a low temperature is baking this so much closer to what I would have expected for something about 100 degrees higher, that would, I'd appreciate any comments on that. That's something I'm going to have to troubleshoot. But as far as the bake itself goes, this was done at about 290, 300, and this was done at about 275. So you can clearly see the difference on the 275. Got a nicer golden color and like yellow in the grooves. Over here, the same one. And again, these little dots here, white dots, is just salt. I like salt on challah. But you can see in the grooves, it's a little bit darker. Overall, it baked a little bit harder. This is still, pretty brown. It's almost like a pretzel color, what you would expect from a pretzel. And over here, it's quite a bit lighter, like a golden color. That's true for these other two that I have here. And again, here's another comparison. This one doesn't have salt, so it doesn't look exactly the same. But this is a lighter bake. So what I'll do is I'll let these cool off completely, and then I'll slice into them, and we'll just take a look and do a quick taste test and see if there's any difference between them. But I think I would probably prefer something like this in terms of color. Hopefully it's baked through and through, and I would imagine the texture and the taste of both will be just about equal. Maybe this one the crust will be just a little bit more delicate, which I would prefer. Nobody likes a tough crust on a challah bread. So let them cool off, and then we'll come back and check them side by side. The other thing here I want to point out is that we have that reversing variable speed fan that kind of keeps the air moving randomly in the baking chamber. And I have to give credit to the oven because these loaves were baked, from the back to the front, and also at only one level. And I didn't do any rotations or change the heights of the shelves or anything during the bake. I just put it in, turned on the oven, and took it out when the time was done. And yet when I look at the sides and the ends, both sides here, everything looks very, very evenly baked. So the oven really does deserve a lot of credit for that very even air movement, or actually I should say the opposite, very random air movement that keeps the bake consistent and even no matter where it is in the oven, and whether it's in the front and the back, or the top or the bottom. So kudos for that. Also, when we look under the loaves, they look very consistent there. Nothing burnt, nicely brown. This is the ones that were at a slightly higher temperature. Look very, very good. So no complaints in terms of top to bottom on the loaves either. Sometimes you see, it gets burned on the bottom or burned on the top, and it looks great. All right, we're ready to cut these open and check them out. This one over here that I'm touching was baked about 25 degrees less than this one here, and you can certainly see the difference. Let's open them up and see what it looks like inside. Here we are inside. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see much difference. I'm mainly looking at the thickness of the crust, and I would say that looks just about identical. In terms of taste and texture inside, I'm guessing that will be the same too, but I'm going to check and let you know. Okay, I've gone ahead and tried them both. And now that I tried them, I actually have to say that the one that was baked at about 25 degrees less is a little bit more moist and soft than this one here. They're very, very similar, but this would, I think, be the winner in terms of the coloration and the texture inside. But really, today was just about testing out the new oven, putting it through its paces, and there's much more tweaking to be done here in a separate video when we talk about challah bread and formulation and the process. But in terms of the oven itself, I think we're off to a good start. I have some questions I need to ask the manufacturer about the temperatures and the other things, and I'll report back in another video. So that's it for now, and until next time we meet, go bake something.